Hi, everybody. Matt Lawton here. This is the Astrological Winds channel. Going to take a look at the astrological weather report, not only for this week of the 24th through the 30th, but I'm going to take a quick look at the outer planet activity for December also. Not a real lot there, actually. So I think I can really fit in both. And the star of this week is Venus. Um, Venus is going to go into Sagittarius, and before that, it's going to aspect most of the outer planets. So that's what I'm going to be mainly talking about, and then a little bit about December. And first, just a little bit of business. Bear with me if you've heard it before. The Astrological Winds channel is a free video blog. It's a YouTube channel, and I do it weekly. If you have a YouTube account and you like what you see, I'd really like you to become a follower. And when you do that, I'd really like you to turn your notifications on, because if you don't, you're not going to be remembering that the blog's being posted every week. So I don't have time to personally, hit everybody in the world about that. So don't forget to do that. Also, remember the blog is also still available on podcasts, same exact audio copy of what you're getting on this video on the YouTube channel. It was a podcast long before it was a YouTube channel. And remember, when you only do the audio, it frees you up to do other things. So a lot of times it's hard to get all those podcasts in every week. You can do it like while you're driving, while you're taking a walk or something. You're not married to the video, okay? Also, if you have an Instagram page, Astrological Winds channel does too, become a follower. And that way the link will show up in your newsreel. Sometimes I do post other stuff in there too. I haven't been doing it a lot lately, but sometimes I do. And then you can always find the blog links on my website, www.astrologicalwinds.com, which also has the tab has a lot of the older blogs on it too from the last few months. So if you need to go back and look at the monthly or some particular week, that you want to just kind of get a better handle on what happened to you that week, they're available up there for months still. That also is where I list my professional services. I've been a professional astrologer for over 20 years. I've been doing charts that long. I was trained professionally for 7 years. So I'd really like to do your chart, or someone else that, is looking for that kind of work. And you should get an annual report around your birthday every year. I give 10% off if it's in your birthday month. That gives you your weather report for the year. If you're listening to this blog, you should be getting this stuff. It's really important for you to know how to work with your energy. And remember, too, elections is another thing I do. If you guys are starting a business, getting married, having a surgery, you should really be checking in and making sure you're lining that stuff up for the right timing. I do children's charts too, how to better relate to your kids, relationship charts, all kinds of stuff. So check the website out for that. Remember, this is a free service. So what I ask people is they pass the link along. I really appreciate when people do that. It is really the way I like the blog to grow. It's, to me, gets the real people in, and the ones who really want to hear it and stay. There's so much to choose from out there, and I think, like, when people hear about it from somebody else that they know, it really makes a bigger impact. So really appreciate when you do that for me at the end of the blog. Remember, if you don't know astrology really well, don't get stuck on the terms. You want to hear what the energy is. We can all make our lives better when we work and control the energy of our energy field. And when we know what the planets are doing, then we can be much more aligned with that energy, right? Okay, so what I want to do is get into this Venus journey here. And on Monday and Tuesday, basically, it stretches over 2 days. It starts with Venus conjuncting Mercury retrograde, and they will both quincunx Chiron at the same time. And I really think this can have a very healing effect on relationships if it's used correctly. Now, remember, Venus is still in Scorpio. Mercury is retrograde in Scorpio. It's the relationship time of the year. It's not an easy time for a lot of relationships. I get that, and I know, like, people clients, people like that have gone through some hard times in the last 2 or 3 weeks with that kind of stuff. This gives us an opportunity to change some of that stuff, to start changing it. And once Venus goes into Sagittarius, it'll really break up that energy and the Scorpio energy in relationships and start to lift it back up. It won't be so heavy, so deep, so profound, all this stuff going on, but I really think this is a time. Mercury and Venus, when they're together in a conjunction, we can really express what we're feeling, especially our love and affectionate feelings for others. We can do that really well. So I really think with Mercury being retrograde, if there's someone or someone's in your life right now that you're just trying to deepen your connection with and get a better understanding of what's going on with each other, this is a great time to do it. Not only does this give us the ability to express our affection and love well, but I think the Mercury retrograde, especially in Scorpio and even Venus in Scorpio, with the right attitude, it can be done on a really deep, intimate level, like a really like get into a quiet space with the other person you're trying to express this with. And I think you can get really open up some great discussions that will really help you understand one another and even the dynamics of the relationship itself, how you both see it. So it's really a good time in general to let people know how we're feeling, because this is going to help improve relationships. It can help them move into new territory. And if nothing else, right, okay, it's Mercury retrograde, right, maybe the communication isn't working still well. It's Mercury and Venus still in Scorpio. Maybe we're still licking our wounds emotionally about some of the things we've gone through, right? With these people that you're wanting to express this with. So maybe you're not quite ready to come out and do that yet, is my point, right? Well, then with Mercury retrograde, you can really do the inner work on yourself about this kind of stuff. You can really tell yourself how you feel about the relationships, right? And then with the quincunx to Chiron, this shows that we can make adjustments to our attitudes, both intellectually and um, and about relationships. We can start to look at them and kind of get a little bit more of an objective or outside viewpoint and be like, oh, yeah, I can see how I need to make some adjustments in my attitude if I want to really, work and express what I'm trying to express to this other person. So now I really think this can really be worked with either inside or deeply, intimately with someone on a one-on-one situation. Now the other effects of Mercury and Venus getting together is it really can stimulate your creative side, especially with words, right? So any kind of art that you participate in that has words or language as part of it or that kind of even music too. It's just a really great time where that stuff will be very, very stimulated. Um, it's a time where what you see as beauty, you can bring that out in your art. And it also opens us up to art too, and its value as a healing energy, as a healing property, like even creating an aesthetically healing environment, right? Something like that. But this can also, it can also, other things can indicate good time. You could work out some good financial or business deals right now. You can really be open in your discussion about what you want. And then the other thing that Mercury and Venus do. And it's interesting with Mercury retrograde too with this one. This one may be one everybody should kind of try to keep open about this week, is that it helps us see the patterns that are behind things when Mercury and Venus are up, like the patterns that are behind life and how we plug in to those patterns too. So like this can give us like a really better understanding of the world and how it works, especially in relation to us. And once again, what does that do? It will help us adjust our attitudes, our beliefs about life in general, and hopefully let go and release some things that may, are not serving us well anymore. They're just time, things to be let go of, basically. Then on Wednesday, beautiful, 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 beautiful repeat of what happened last week with the sun and the new moon and Mercury retrograde. Venus will lock into a water grand trine with Jupiter exalted in Cancer, yes, still retrograde, and Saturn in Pisces, but stationary now, no longer going retrograde. In fact, the very next day on Thursday is the day that Saturn goes direct. And you might remember in the monthly, I talked a little bit about Saturn going direct. But so this is great. This grand trine is just great because once again, it's bringing together, it's got Jupiter and Saturn. So, like I told you last week, Jupiter in a strong sign, Saturn, they're two kind of opposite energies. So when they're together, especially in a trine, they really balance each other out. Jupiter is bringing us new things, growth, expansion, things like that. And in Cancer, it feels like, okay, it could be helping us meet our needs and our loved ones' needs. And then Saturn is bringing in stability and concentration and focus of that growth and expansion, putting it into something real and super strong. Whenever a planet is stationing, that energy can be really strong. So we can really hook into some of this great Jupiter Venus energy. Now, remember, Venus trine Jupiter by itself is the single most beneficial aspect there is of all the aspects. It's the single most beneficial one. So, if you're bringing in beneficial stuff with the Venus Jupiter, this Saturn stationary can really drop it in and make it really reliable and stable and strong and something that can last for a long time. So once again, this is Venus going in here. So what is this really going to work well with? Relationships. That's what it's going to work well with. We are going Venus with trining Jupiter is just so great for relationships. We're so easily able to access our emotions and connect them harmoniously with our loved ones. It comes so easy now. We can feel very at ease with others, even people that we don't know. This is great for like connecting with, but people that we love, we just feel so good. But socially, it's a great time to go out and connect with others, actually, because any event that comes your way that involves socializing, whether it's business, entertainment, is likely to bring in some beneficial people to you, and it'll be a very pleasant experience, right? And so this is really good for romance, obviously. This is where, romantic relationships really give benefit to one another to both people. And it also can bring in financial windfalls. Venus and Jupiter together can bring in a financial benefit. So, and another thing about this is good for travel, any kind of travel. Once again, whether it's business, vacation, or whatever, it can expand our world, bring growth into our world. And then that Saturn is just going to anchor all of it, right? It's going to stabilize all of that energy. And we can really work on relationships or financial stuff in a long term kind of way, right? It can really deepen our connections with others in a very long term way where we feel really reliable and stable. It's an easy time to work out issues. Once again, just like with the Mercury and Venus earlier in the week, you can really sit down and talk in a very stable, deep way. A time when we can be very smart too with our money and resources. So if we're getting those benefits, the Saturn can come in and manage that stuff really well, can have us make some really good decisions with that stuff that helps us stabilize. But in general, this is really wanting to stabilize these beneficial relationships that we're having on a practical level for the long term. And the energy is there to do it. And we can do it in a lot of emotional depth because it's water. So, like I said, Thursday is the day Saturn goes direct. I did talk about that in the monthly. I'm not going to get into it too much right now. It turns direct right about 25 degrees of Pisces, and it will stay in Pisces until February 14th and then go into Aries, the sign of its fall, right? For 2.5 years approximately. And so a lot of the ideals that have been born in the last 2.5 years. Now just think about that politically. What I just said, the stuff that's gone on in the world in the last 2.5 years, not just in the US, all of over the world. A lot of stuff. There's been a lot of division because Pisces is the dualistic sign, right? About ideals and how to put them into the real world, Saturn, right? And now it's going to go on February back into Aries, the sign of its fall, one of the weakest places that Saturn can be. A lot of those ideals over the next 2.5 years are going to completely collapse. Okay. A lot of the stuff that happened the last 2.5 years, gone, going to just collapse. Not built on stable ground, not built in unity, built in division, divisive beliefs, things like that. So there's not a lot of strength, a watery sign, and now the fire is going to come up and burn a lot of that stuff down. So a lot of those structures are going to fall, Saturn in fall in Aries, over the next 2.5 years, starting in February. What should we do personally while Saturn is still in Pisces this next couple months or so? Is we want to stabilize our ideals into reality as best we can. Try to build some structure, some form around our ideals that is something physical, but it's got to be something practical too, or it's just not going to stand the test of Saturn in Aries. And then Saturday is the day that Mercury goes direct. Okay. Yay. Right. Everybody's going to be like, yay, at 21 degrees Scorpio. Okay. And it will go back into Sagittarius on December 12th. So we're going to have shadow Mercury retrograde going through most, mid-December, basically, So remember, when it makes the station, that's when the Mercury retrograde effects can be the strongest. It doesn't mean we're completely released next weekend. It's going to be really strong Mercury retrograde energy next weekend. Delays, misunderstandings, stuff going off course. It's going to really crystallize then. And then over the next 2 weeks, it'll slowly release that energy, and all those things should start moving at a normal rate. But yeah, what a Mercury retrograde period, that started in Sag. A lot of the big ideas that didn't have the details worked out, boom, went into Scorpio, and boy, everything collapsed then. I mean, a lot of the things that, people did this past year, they're backpedaling on now. They're like actually saying, oh, made a big mistake. I actually need to do the opposite thing. You know what I'm talking about. So anyway, then we go into Saturday and Sunday and on the weekend, and Venus continues a very interesting journey, trining Neptune, another beautiful aspect, just like the trine to Jupiter, but opposite Uranus. And to me, I always say this: these guys don't work in a vacuum. They're gonna all be working together, right? And Venus Neptune versus Venus Uranus is two very different kinds of energies. So how do we, put that all together, right? Is the question. How do we, use that energy as best we can? Because Venus Neptune is all about idealism, right? Injecting our idealism basically into relationships, and like what we can do in this is really live in a fantasy world, about relationships in a dream world, which is not a bad thing, but like reality a lot of times is different, right? But like we can really connect with this beautiful energy like that. And what that really brings out, Venus is the lower the lower vibe of love, physical human love, and Neptune is the higher, compassionate, unconditional, spiritual love. So it brings these two together. And really, what happens with people is we become a lot more compassionate towards others. We actually express our Buddhist heart, our Buddha heart, much better than like we become, we give out unconditional love, and we can make connections with people on very deep levels too, like on the spiritual plane. But then Venus Uranus comes around, and it's like, okay, that can bring up like very unexpected events in relationships. Now, that doesn't necessarily have to be a negative thing, right? If it's like some kind of stimulating event, maybe it comes from the idealism of the Venus Neptune, and it's like, wow, this is some new idea that my partner or someone I'm in a deep connection with, because the opposition shows this is going to play out through partnerships, right? Oppositions are always that one-on-one type of relationship. So, like, maybe our partner, or even somewhere where we've developed with our own ideals, inject some new interesting energy into a relationship. And that can be very stimulating. It can be very exciting, you know? But the other end of that is, if the person we're in the relationship with is not living up anywhere near those ideals, then that can be the upsetting event that actually that we're very upset about, that feels like, we want to break away from this person, instead. So it's very, very interesting, but either way, the emotions are going to be very stimulated, right? And Venus Uranus is looking for something new to do, some kind of new form of entertainment, recreation that stimulates the relationship. So that's why, if we can bring the Venus Neptune in for that, it could be a really good thing. So, for me, I would say this weekend coming up, really good time to do something different with your loved ones. Something out of the ordinary, something that will break up the energy and bring it to new places. And if you're not in a love relationship, right, this energy can make you go out there looking for that ideal relationship and being like very open and flirtatious. So new relationships can form under this energy, but they can be very different than normal, right? Like first of all, they can be unstable because they're based on an ideal, and you may find out right away or really quickly that that's not happening. So they could end up being very short term, or they can be a very different type of relationship. You can feel the connection with the other on the spiritual or soul level, but they may be a very different person to you, maybe another culture, a different age, a different socioeconomic background, an alternative way of looking at life, all of the above, something like that. So, like, that means if you make a connection like that and it's deep, and the Neptune comes in and makes it deep, then you can end up having the very, it can be a long term type of relationship. It just can be a very odd, different one. It's not going to be a traditional type of relationship, because most likely the background of the people involved is going to be very, very different. But definitely a great weekend to go out and do something different, something that appeals to your ideals, something that excites you, something that brings in new adventures, new experiences, and can really liven up the relationship. And then we end the week with Venus going into Sag, finally leaving these testy waters of Scorpio, where she's in detriment, behind. And when Venus goes into Sag, she becomes a lot more extroverted. She becomes a lot more friendly, outgoing, will wear the regular emotions out on her sleeve instead of that Scorpio hiding in. No, now it's coming out. Although, that being said, Venus has no interest in those really deep emotions anymore. So, like, if you're going to try to possess someone with Venus and Sag, they're going to run away from you, right? They want freedom. They're willing to give you freedom. Venus and Sag wants that independence and loves that energy that brings, where everybody's like, bubbly and just fired up, so definitely also a time of the year that's great for going outdoors, enjoying nature, finding beauty in nature, and even getting artistic inspiration from nature, working with forms of art that have to do with nature. So, really great change and shift in the energy by the end of the week for Venus. But what a journey. So, December, there's only two things I want to talk about. So, this will be quick. Um, Not a lot of outer planet activity in December. Okay. So on December 10th, that's the day that Neptune is going to go direct right after Saturn did. Now, remember, they've been kind of conjunct one another. They're a little, they're 4 degrees apart, but they're still conjunct one another, right? And they're going to be going into Aries together next year again. Neptune will go back into Aries March 31st. Now, you remember, right around that time this year, was when it first went into Aries and a lot of stuff blew up in the world, right? Middle East, things got really bad in a lot of places. And like I said, Neptune in Aries is very troublesome. We've got 14 years of that coming up until the year 2039, and it's intense. Neptune and Aries energy. We got a little bit. It's going to be a really dangerous time for the world, and I've been saying this for years. This is my opinion. I think there's going to be a lot of war based on idealism over water, over oil, and it's going to be difficult. It's not going to be an easy thing. So, but before that, we have a few more months of Neptune in Pisces, the sign it loves to be in. And once again, what's the mission here on a personal level? Trying to get some of our ideals into reality somehow in a good way on a personal level, so that we feel like our lives are more self-fulfilling, that they're meeting our ideals more. So that's what we really want to do. And when Saturn and Neptune, the next 2.5 years, when they are both in Aries together, that is going to be a really hard time, you guys. The world's going to be really, it's going to go through a lot. I'm telling you this now, and not just the U.S., the whole world is really. It's going to be a dangerous, dangerous time, because both those planets in that sign, they get very defensive, and they go to war as a lot of times in their way of dealing with things. So yeah, just feeling like ideas and justice aren't working from whatever perspective you see that as. And both societal type planets or beyond societal, and so like really have an agenda that's beyond our individual lives. So that's going to be a really, really challenging 2.5 years, and in all honesty, 14, 15, 20 years really, of a lot of change and challenge in the world coming up. The other thing is December 17th, the second hit of Jupiter retrograde squaring Chiron retrograde. And I did talk about that last month. And this can be painful. It really can be, because it kind of ties into what I was just saying with the Neptune. It shows us where our belief systems are in tatters right now. They've just been destroyed, right? By the world, by society, by things like that. Like, they just keep taking shots. So there's a lot of tension and stress right now built around beliefs in society. And this is a time where we really have to take a look at it and see how our beliefs are hurting ourselves, hurting each other, hurting society's greater good, and try to figure out ways to deal with this. And a lot of it is really just like addressing your own maybe rigidity on your own beliefs and how that's hurting you, and how that ripples out and hurts everyone around you and society. So a lot of work to do. So that's what I got for this week, you guys. Next week we do have a full moon, and it's at 13, 14 degrees of Gemini. And of course, with Mercury turning direct, he's going to turn around and start hitting some of the same aspects he's had the last 2 or 3 weeks again. So that's some of the stuff I'll be looking at next week couple other things here and there, but the main thing will be that full moon at 14 degrees Gemini. All right, this is Matt Lawton. This is the Astrological Winds channel. You are going to pass this link along right now because I just did all this for free for you. Thank you so much. If you'd like to give a currency donation, no amount is too small, and I really appreciate everyone who has. I have some people who do every once in a while, and I just really appreciate you. Like even $5 helps. It does cost me money to put the blog out. My Venmo is at the sign at Matthew at 2 T's hyphen in the middle, Lawton, Lauten, Cash App, $ Matthew Lawton. Really appreciate anyone can help me on that level. Best way to support me is to go to my website when you need a reading. Check out the menu of the kind of readings I do. You should definitely be getting one every year on your birthday. No question. If you're watching this channel, you should be getting that. You're worth the investment. And if you have a hard time coming up with the full payment right away, I will, take half up front, and you can make 1 or 2 payments over the next couple months and do it that way, which a lot of people do. No worries. We can do that. It doesn't hurt to ask. Never hurts to ask, right? So anyway, check that out on the website too. Please pass on. There's all kinds of other charts I do too. Also, if you have a group and you're looking for a lecture or a workshop or a class or mini readings, I can do that. If you're a student, I have some beginner classes on podcasts. If I can find 4 live students and they want to meet anywhere from 2 to 4 times a week, we can do that. But I need that commitment ahead of time. So yeah, check the website out. If you know anyone else who's interested in astrology, looking for a reading, believe me, a professional reading is so much different than what you get on a computer printout or trying to look it up yourself in a book. It's a much more holistic experience, much more experienced experience. Like, would you go into a court case and try to be your own lawyer? It's kind of like similar to that. Like, you might do a little bit, but you're not going to get everything. So professional reading, you will get much more out of it than you will in any other way. So if you're ready for that, do the investment in yourself. You're going to have your chart your whole life with you, and every year you're going to have little changes, and they do relationship charts, children's charts, elections, so many different things. So check the website out for all that stuff. All right, folks, I will see you all next week. And until then, namaste, and we will look at that full moon in Gemini.